in Pennsylvania, and so all scales there. Sara is also a graduate of the EMU training, as I am, and also Norm Horn has joined us from formerly with Invinity in Pennsylvania. Norm's recently relocated down to Delaware, and he's with New Ecology. Again, Passive House trained. He was the project manager for the first commercial Interfit certified project, Passive House project in the country, which is actually located in Kane, Pennsylvania. So excited to have them on. We are also hoping to be joined by Kevin Brennan, who is an air tightness and he's a Passive House expert, focusing primarily on air tightness and envelope. He is based out of New York City. He also has another job as a New York City firefighter, and we believe he may have been called out on an emergency. So hopefully he can still join us here today. Kevin has worked at all scales in Passive House. I think he's been in it for about 12 or 13 years, maybe a little more. He was instrumental in setting up the first Passive House training center in Brooklyn with some other folks in show, the architect and some other folks there through the Passive House Academy with Tommaso Leary and others. And he has worked as a consultant on projects ranging from high-end brownstone renovations with Mike Ingwe, Ingwe Architects in New York, and others, as well as some of the largest Passive House projects, the big multifamily projects in New York. So hopefully he can join us soon. I'm going to stop talking, turn it over to Enrico. He's going to talk a little bit about EMU and the boot camps that are coming up, and then we'll jump into the discussion.
Thank you, Dave. That was a great kickoff. For those who don't know me, I'm Enrico Bonilauri, the co-founder and CEO of EMU Passive. I'm an architect by training, and EMU, my company, was actually founded as an architectural practice back home in Italy. And we soon realized that we could design the best high performance green buildings we wanted to, but when it came to implementing things on site, we were kind of in the middle of nowhere where trades or builders being able to follow high performance details or applying high performance products or meet passive house certification or other green building certifications. So when we moved the company to the US in 2016, 2017-ish, we moved away from practicing architecture and we focused on passive house training, mostly on passive house builder training, because we found a big gap between the design side and the actual implementation. And in fact, today, most of what EMU does is passive house training. We provide most of the hands-on passive house training in the US. Dave mentioned the boot camp options that we have. A boot camp is when we have a week of training in a given location. We are planning on being in Pittsburgh at the end of February and in Philadelphia at the end of March, followed by Brooklyn, Boston, and Maine on our East Coast tour before we head back to Denver. And we really try to build community with these events because really something that we use this to say often is it takes a village for the whole construction industry to move forward and for projects to be successful. We do need design folks trained. We do need contractors and builders trained. We do need developers as well as owners and permit office folks being trained. So whenever we have a week of training, we try to engage across the aisle. We don't only focus on builders. We try to have a design build kind of integrated approach on one side. And then it's also fun to meet people. And we always have a social event as part of the training event because it's a way to allow for cross-pollination and to have people that are high performance curious meet people that have taken the training. And that's a great way to kind of overcome fear or uncertainty in the next steps, just to be able to talk to someone who has already been there, or if you try to compare details or your experience with specific products, that's a great way to share that. And in fact, that led us to the panel discussion today, which I'm very honored to have Norm and Sara and Dave being part of it. I do hope Kevin can meet us today because we all bring our different experiences to the table from different parts of the country, from different types of projects. And so I'm really excited about this discussion. We have some bullet points that we have worked out kind of lead the discussion. As we go, please type your questions in the chat and we can see how we can fit them in the discussion as we go along.
Great. So why don't we jump in? So I guess why don't we start? I gave a brief introduction, but maybe we'll kick it over to you, Sara, and if you want anything else you want to add to that, but also to kind of kick this off, talk a little bit about, if you could, kind of how you got introduced to Passive House and your sort of journey in your education, to this point. And yeah, we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so hi, my name's Sara Sadek. I'm a professional engineer. I work for PJ Construction in Pittsburgh. I'm the head of the quality department, but in my past life, I was actually a building envelope consultant in Boston. And so the first time I heard about Passive House was when the Cornell building was first in the design phase. And that's the first time I had ever heard about Passive House. And the company I worked for, we would have these like group meetings where we would talk about like what's up and coming in the industry. And so that was like the first time I'd ever heard of it. And to me, it was like a major light bulb moment where it was like, okay, I personally care about the environment, but it makes a lot of sense, even if you're not somebody that doesn't care too much about the environment, because some people don't, right? There's still a huge draw to a building that performs efficiently. So in my mind, it was like, okay, this is going to become the future, like it or love it. Like whether you care about the environment or you want to reduce your operating costs, like this will become the way of the future at some point. So to me, that was the first time I was introduced. And carrying on with the building envelope consulting background, it ties so well into the major goals of Passive House. So that's where I come from. And then working here at PJ, this is the quality control department. So we try to prevent errors, but a lot of times we're responding to errors. So it's kind of like, all right, as you get building tighter, as these codes change, as we're getting more and new materials, and we have to be more careful about detailing, how can we make sure we're training not just our PMs, but our supers, our foremen, our tradespeople. This to me, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let me jump in a second, Sara. If everybody on the call could please mute themselves, double check. We got a few people off mute.
Oh, that's all right.
All right, we're good.
It's a big part of what we do for commercial construction is making sure the envelope is tight, but then also looking ahead to where the code is going to be going. And then my personal interest is being sustainable and looking for a sustainable future. So that's how I got introduced.
Outstanding. Over to you, Norm.
Hey, thanks, Dave. My name is Norm Horn. I'm a construction project manager with New Ecology. We're a nonprofit green building consultant based in Boston. We have offices in Baltimore as well, and in Wilmington, Delaware, where I work out of. I guess I got into Passive House probably about late teens, maybe. Was working in State College for a builder called Infinity, and we had a project coming up that was going to require. But we always did some sort of green building or above code practice, but we had one that was coming up with some pretty aggressive performance goals, and we had recently lost someone from the firm who was kind of like the building science lead, and I didn't really feel like I knew what I was talking about or was qualified to like take that project on. And in the process of trying to figure out, where we're getting materials and what we're going to be using, how we're going to build it, I stumbled into 475, where I met Ken Levinson. Ken told me, like, you've got to take this training. Like, you've got to do this. There's, no option. And it just happened that not long after that, there was a training set up in Pittsburgh through Green Building Alliance, and that was kind of like that was the turning point in my career, and that was like everything else is sort of in the past, where I mostly focused on, construction, but a lot of finishes. And, I didn't really, um, didn't spend a lot of time thinking about, building envelope and building performance. And now that's really all I think about.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, your trial by fire was really that cane project, right?
no, this is before
Oh,
Kane.
it was before that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. This was a couple years before Kane.
So can you talk about a couple of those projects, maybe that kind of some of the moments where when you were going down that road trying to deliver these extremely challenging projects, what changed for you in the way you looked at the work? What kind of really defined for you that how different these buildings were than your experience previously and delivering them? What was different in delivering them?
I mean, the Kane project for me was a different one because I was very used to single family detached wood frame structures and didn't have really any experience with attached masonry buildings that are over 100 years old. So it's one thing to build a new building and to make it airtight. And that's not, it's a challenge, but it's only as challenging as you make it, I think. Um, Dealing with existing conditions, I mean, that was a lot of head scratching. And, you know, it was worked out fairly well in the documents, but there was also a lot of uncovering things in the field. And, um, I think one of the things that I got from the training was really understanding the materials that you're working with and what their properties are, and understanding the implications of putting different materials and components together, and whether that gives you a good result or if it sets you up for a failure. So I think that's a critical part of having people in the field understanding what they're working with, rather than just
Yeah.
being given instructions to follow.
So we on the conversation that the group had yesterday, sort of pre-planning this, the conversation today, that came up a lot. Like, and Sarah, I think maybe this is a good place to jump over to you because we talked about the importance of pre-work planning, the importance of when you say continuous airtightness, that continuous is continuous. Right. So like when Norm's talking about materials coming together and being compatible and, existing conditions where you might have a substrate material that's really, you don't really fully have a grasp on its composition, occasionally, or its competency, you've got to really put that extra time in up front on pre-work planning and on coordination, make sure, that hopefully the details are well thought out by the design team, but could you talk a little bit more about how kind of that translates into the, kind of the airtightness quality work that you're, in charge of?
Yeah, I mean, like today's theme is about training for the tradespeople. So for us, if you think about like the New York City subway system, there's lots of police in New York City and whatnot that look for terrorism and whatnot, but we still have posters that say, if you see something, say something, right? So one of our best resources we have, especially on larger jobs, is our tradespeople. They're the last line of defense. Like you can design this and consult this to death, but if the person installing the work doesn't know what they're installing, doesn't know how to install the product, doesn't know why it's important, doesn't know how it integrates with the other tradespeople, then all that planning's for naught. So the way I look at it, like, yes, pre-planning is always really important, but like if we're not taking the tradespeople and inviting them into that conversation, we might not see that we have something that's not constructible, or we might not realize that there's a sort of like a hidden condition or an unusual condition that we really need to address early, fix our design early when it's still in paper land. And then even if we get into construction and we get somewhere, like if our tradespeople know what to look for, at least know when to say, hey, this looks weird. I know that this is important. This looks weird. I don't have the answer, but I need help. Like that is one of our best resources that's super underutilized in construction. And so this idea of like training our tradespeople and valuing them as craftspeople, as people that take pride in their work, all that, like that is the best thing that we can do to ensure that your job will pass the like 11th hour test, but like is just generally built better. So that's my
Wow.
There's always a lot of training from like designers and engineers, and as an engineer, like I get that, but like for me, when I go into the field and we see mistakes and you talk to the tradesperson, like 9.9 out of the 10 times are like, I made this mistake because I didn't know I was supposed to do it this or that way. Like nobody goes to work saying like, I'm gonna mess this up today. They all want to do a good job and feel like they built it right the first time. So like let's educate them, give them a chance to succeed, and like your building is gonna be way better in the end.
Yeah, that is so well said. I mean, just like standing ovation, for for that. Uh, yeah, for that. It makes me think of. So I was with Macero Construction here in Pittsburgh, working on the library. Actually, I should take it back. I wasn't with Macero at the time, but I worked on the project, the architect, when Macero was building it for the first Passive House library, which was delivered here in Pittsburgh. And we got a comment from one of the project managers, sorry, superintendents. He said, "Hey, you guys sent the project manager to training, and the project engineer went to training, but superintendent didn't go. The assistant superintendent didn't go. The airtightness guys didn't go." And I think that is such a critical thing we've got to drive home, like in all of this. And if anybody's involved in like lean construction, and you go through the last planner process, last planner training and whatnot, it's having the guys who are closest to the delivery of the work be the tip of the spear on quality. I mean, they are the guys who are going to make and gals who are going to make it happen. I don't know. So I feel like dragging Enrico back in here. Can you talk a little bit about this is exactly what the boot camps are targeting, right? This exact issue. It's to bring in the folks who are going to put their hands on the materials and put these buildings together and getting this advanced training first in the sort of philosophy and methodology, and then on the hands-on with the passive pods, in the boot camp. I mean, what can you talk a little bit about the kind of reactions that you get from these folks who take the course and how, sort of their perspective changes as they go through this hands-on process?
Yes, and by the way, Kevin just joined us, so
Oh, fantastic.
we have that's a great point you bring to the table. We have a lot of aha moments or light bulbs going off during the training because at the end of the day, it is not rocket science. It's more about having the clarity about what you need to do, which, to Sarah's point, not only that information, what needs to be done, is oftentimes not that does not really trickle down to the tradesperson, but a lot of the construction details that we see being provided in the field are often missing key parts or key details, or they're not really realistic in how they can go together in the field. There is some materiality to individual products, especially when it comes to taping or membranes, or even insulation that you don't get from a data sheet. And so we recommend even specifiers or designer come and take the training because there is, if you, like me, I went to architecture school, I didn't have a day in the field until I was actually a practicing architect. And that was the real learning ground on how to design details. You're not able to design details until you go to the field and start and see how things come together. Like, of course, the detail is not going to work because they're going to install the subfloor before they install the window. And to this day, we receive details from architects that are impossible to air seal, but on paper they look great. You know, so even just the sequencing, we have some intentional sequence exercises and team games as part of the workshop that are designed to have people talk to each other because we are each other's best resource. And if you have your tradesperson talking to your supervisor, talking to your architect, then that is the best perspective because you can solve problems before they actually show up. An issue that we see is sometimes the um, company owner comes and take the training, or For larger companies, you have maybe the project manager, but not the superintendent or anyone in the actual field that spend significant amount of time in the field. So the person that drives by once a week to check on the progress, they are trained, but the people that spend 8 hours a day in the field, they don't get trained, and then there's a missed opportunity there. It should be the other way around.
Yeah.
We've seen that not terribly often, but like maybe 50-50, and so training takes time and takes money. And so at least trying to understand that the people that spend a lot of time in the field are the ones that needs to be trained, because if, just like Sara was saying, if they become your eyes and they start caring, it's a lot easier to meet those goals.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Hey, we should jump out or jump back a little bit and welcome Kevin Brennan. Kevin, super glad you could join us. So I did a little bit of a brief introduction for you, touching on early work with Passive House and Passive House Academy and the training center, in New York, and your work as a consultant. I also mentioned your day job, just in case we thought you might be called out by chance at the same time here. But why don't we give you a chance to introduce yourself a little further, and then our first question that we threw out to the other folks was just about kind of how you got introduced into Passive House, and kind of what motivated you to kind of take on that mission.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Sorry I'm late. I actually was on a call and couldn't get back. But it was before I joined the fire department, I was worked as a weatherization installer, air sealing and insulating low-income homes in New York City. And then right at that time, BPI, Building Performance Institute, we started instituting a bunch of training, energy auditor, sales specialist. So I got a real quick, almost education in building science, and exposed to all the techniques, blower door testing, thermal imaging. And I was working in weatherization, where we're triaging houses, trying to air seal them, save them up as best we can. And then later on in my career, I discovered Passive House. I was at a conference, I saw David White talk, and he talked about Passive House. And young in my BPI career, weatherization, I would always ask people what their tightest blower door test number was. And it was remarkable for me to know, like, we can get projects that airtight. We can do great air sealing. We can get incredible blower door numbers. This is possible. I need to know more about this. So his energy efficiency was just exciting, because it wasn't middle of the road. It was top of the pyramid. It was the best that we can. It was doing future-proofing homes and buildings. So we took a training. We went over to Ireland, took the tradesperson course with Tomas. And the company I was working for, we built a training center. So we had a lot of people coming through, taking the new training. And during that process, people kept asking, can you help us out with this project? Can you be an air sealing specialist for us? At that same time, I was also working with the Air Barrier Association of America, teaching the air sealing, the air barrier installer class, which opened my world to peel and sticks and fluid applieds. And that's a great training program and a quality assurance program that sets the tone of what an air barrier professional is and how to execute that. And they make sure that an on-site installer is certified. There's a daily worksheets and paperwork. So it's a great system. And next thing you know, I find myself teaching a class for the construction team building the Cornell Tech Towers. Monadnock is the construction company. They took that endeavor on, and we trained their site supers, assistant supers, project managers, project executives, a few people that were involved in pre-construction, as well as the air barrier installer, the panel installer, and a few of the other trades that we're interested in. And we mixed in my background as a fireman, all learning needs to be a little bit hands-on, otherwise you lose the crowd. If it's construction and firemen are very similar in that it needs to be a kinesthetic learning environment. And we did a mock-up and we troubleshooted. And then after that project, they brought me on as a high-performance building specialist. I'm pretty much a Passive House troubleshooter to try and how do you make a building airtight? How do you test it? And it was a great experience for me and a great sharing experience for everyone. And I still do work with Monadnock as a air barrier consultant, going in and coaching. And I just find my role of diving into the technical details, really getting into the systems and finding where the gaps are from the two-dimensional plans to the 3D worlds, and just figuring out where these connections are made. And it's been pretty amazing to see the transformation. People get excited about a good blow a door test number. Electricians, plumbers, everyone that's working on these projects, they really take pride in knowing that it's a different building. And I always joke around that you can tell it's a passive house when it's the middle of the winter and the guys that are painting are in shorts and there's no heat on. And it's pretty cool to see that it is possible in New York City in the middle of winter to be comfortable in a building without any heat going. So, wow.
Thank you. I mean, that such a great path that you've been on as well. And it's interesting, we're sort of circling around a couple of themes I hear coming up a lot, right? One is this idea of craft, which we've all been talking about a lot, which I think is so fundamental. I think anybody in this community, and I should say, and Enrico talked about it, I think quite a bit there as well. There's this community that I've become a part of. We've all become a part of, which is an incredibly engaged and excited, community. That once you've kind of seen this work, once you've been in a passive house, once you've sort of experienced this training, and you've kind of seen the other side and what's possible. You don't want to go back. You don't want to settle for, leaky buildings, not well considered, construction and all that. And this community really kind of supports each other, and these integrated conversations between design and the design side and the delivery side, I think, are really energized by this sort of combined, like everybody's trying to row in the same direction here, but everybody has a different perspective and a different opportunity to contribute to it. I mean, I'm thinking in my own case, I've had so many of those aha moments, having done both the designer training and the training and the trades training, and looking forward to being part of the boot camp in Pittsburgh when it comes here. That I just don't. I look back at 30 odd years of my career in buildings, and I'm amazed that what we sort of got away with building and what we built, which was at the time, I mean, everything code compliant, meeting all the requirements. Some of them quite high performing buildings, but not to this level. So there's always that sort of extra level to go to. But I don't know. I guess I'd kick it back to maybe Sara. I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about how you kind of applied when you went through this training, going through your day-to-day work at PJ on projects. How has that experience sort of changed your maybe way of working from before that training?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm an engineer, and I can sit and like read specs forever and be happy, and that's fine with me. But one of the things I realized is like I'm an anomaly in construction. Most of this industry attracts people that have shorter attention spans. Not that that's a bad thing. They're usually very creative and they get stuff done very quickly. But they don't like walls of text. They don't like to sit and do not like just read. They don't like death by PowerPoint. So one of the best things about the EMU training, and any really training that is good for contractors, is it must be hands-on. Like you can train. They need to know a little bit of the theory, which they get into, obviously, but you have to mix it up with, okay, here's some theory. Now we're going to go touch it and do it and fail, over here where it's safe to fail. One of the things that we struggle with in our industry is we're so like with everything being so Zoom oriented and things, our generation growing up with PowerPoint, like we've lost the tactile aspect of learning, and that is so incredibly important when training for field folks. So like just making sure anytime you train somebody, have something physical to look at, have examples, have samples. If you have a project, whether it's residential or commercial, do a mock-up. And it doesn't have to be this big, huge thing. It can be something small, but like have it be tactile and give them a chance to play around with it, to like feel the product, take it apart, pick it apart, whatever. That was one of the really, really great things about EMU, is that when I was sitting there, like, I'm not just taking it to see, is this appropriate for my company? It's like, can the people that will send to this pay attention the way that it's taught? And I thought EMU did a great job making sure that you bounce back and forth between learning and touching. So that was like a really big aha moment, because I'm happy to just like read forever, but that is not how it works in construction. So that was one of my big takeaways.
Yeah, how about I mean, what I've experienced too is when you have that conversation while someone's applying, materials or working on the airtightness or whatnot, and you ask them like, how does this work? Like does this detail make sense? And you start to have a two-way communication with the folks that are doing the work instead of, I think unfortunately, certainly what I've seen in the old school is like, especially the guys who are like the last in the line with their hands on the material, they're getting told what to do.
Yeah.
But one of the exciting things that we're starting to do in this effort and to be more integrated in these conversations is to have a two-way conversation. Tell me
Yeah.
what you see here. What is the opportunity? How could we design this detail better? How could we, maybe it's a sequencing question. Maybe what are the key risks that we have in sequencing that we're going to have to look out for to, to try to make this delivery better. I don't know. I'll maybe kick it back to you, Norm. Thoughts on, kind of what you've seen from those kind of two-way conversations in the field. I mean, it seems there's a shift in, I've experienced a shift in, I think a level of engagement, like a level of interest. I think Kevin touched on it too. When we're focused more on craft and care and really high performing delivery, and you can really engage the guys and the gals who are making it happen. How have you seen those kind of conversations go on projects you've worked on?
I've seen them go both ways. It depends on how much somebody wants to talk. I mean, when you give people a chance, who might not always have a chance, you can get some really good information, right? So I was way back a million years ago. I went to school for landscape architecture. Never practiced in design. It was always in construction. So it gave me kind of an interesting way to approach relationships dealing with architects and engineers and builders. And I think, a lot of times, certainly not everyone, but there are some designers out there who, really value the information they can get from the trades and others who don't. And, there's a lot of good information to be had in talking to people who deal with this stuff every day. And I mean, I would encourage, any designer out there, like, talk to your mechanical installers, talk to the carpenters, ask them if this worked, if it didn't work, what can make it better, what makes it easier for you to execute. I mean, that's a whole other double-edged sword there too. Because I get frustrated with the people. It's like, oh, this is a pain for me. Like, this takes too long. This is irritating. I don't want to do this. It's like,
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you kind of have to just do that. That's the way construction works sometimes.
Yeah, that's an important point too. These buildings are not easy to build. I mean, they're not the quickest, simplest path to, getting the job done.
Yeah.
I'm sure, Kevin, you've seen that, in the projects that you've been on. I don't know. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about that. Like, there's the reality here that you're facing questions of productivity and time, use of time and profits in the construction sector, which are always squeezed, and yet you're asking teams to build a better, a significantly better product. So maybe talk a little bit about that, Kevin, in your experience. How do you kind of get over those potential hurdles and challenges when you're starting to build team buy-in early on?
Yeah. So getting buy-in is always the harsh battle. I remember from a few training projects, the hardest nut to crack is the oldest guy with the oldest experience. And, this isn't going to work. And then next thing you know, you start making a little sense, you show some real world experiences. And next thing you know, they're like, I get this, this makes sense. And now they're on your team. They buy it. They know they're not just being told what to do. They have input on it. And it kind of changes. And I find personally that the efforts to build a mock-up, and a mock-up not just one way, but a mock-up we have mock-up one way, and then within the system we've chosen, can we do it another way and have a conversation about the mock-up? Not so much like a standalone one way, this is how it's designed. If you kind of slow down the construction process, pre-construction, bidding and everything, get a mock-up, get people involved, and then you start to make smart decisions and optimize how it could be installed. That's really helpful. And then having a very clear testing process, either mock-ups or just being on top of the air barrier install if it's fluid or peel and stick, or helping everyone that's touching it to know what to look for, because they're not trained on what to look for, what deficiencies look like. Like if the product is, say, blue, they're just making the wall blue for the most part until they're trained that they have to apply the product in a certain way. If it's peel and stick and pressurize it and the primer, no wrinkles, no fish mouths, no errors or anything like that. Or if it's fluid, completely thick, right thickness, how to test the thickness, what mistakes look like. That's really transformative on the projects. And when it looks perfect, it's as close to we can to get it to perform. But this is just simple details of just getting an air barrier on a wall. We have some complex ones of where the window sits, how is it sitting, why is it there, is it insulated? Those are the more complex ones. And then having a team of support and technical assistance, like how do we test it? How do we find out that there's a mistake here before we have the entire facade filled with brick or a rain screen or something? Because that's when it gets really troublesome. How do you make those repairs? Luckily, I haven't been on a project that has had to do any destructive removal or anything, so I don't have the battle scar of a project. But it is it is a challenge, and like it's amazing how these general contractors can pull together the team and get past that finish line. And it is possible. The difference between a code minimum air tightness project of 0.4 CFM per square foot of surface area and 0.03 is really not that far off. It's just managing some of the holes and some of the intentional penetrations and choosing the systems that actually work together and coordinating the intersections between those assemblies and products. But
yeah, for
So
sure.
one thing I was going to say is you mentioned that you've not gone through like the destructive process. I can say that we have. I mean, most large commercial contractors at some point have had it. It's not just a PJ thing. It is pretty standard, and it's always the envelope. It's industry-wide the most risky part of the building via litigation and whatnot. But let me tell you, if you get somebody, the best thing you can do is have your superintendent come back and work on the job that had errors. And then even if it was that like curmudgeon-y person that didn't want to do anything, if they're the one that has to go back and fix it, they will be your best advocate going forward. And it's kind of like that idea of using crisis as a motivation for change. We've gone through it ourselves, and that has become the best black eye story that we tell. It's like, hey, we don't want to end up here again. I've gone through it. I've had to repair it. It was really painful. It was costly. It's embarrassing, all that stuff. Let's not do that this time. This is really important. You're a new project, a new chance to do it better this time. Pay attention. And then those people that have gone through the failure become your absolute best advocate. And I think sometimes if you don't have the pleasure of having failures like that, it's a lot of personality management, actually. So like just as a small plug for Dale Carnegie course, that has changed my life as far as learning how to talk to people that are different than how I think. And I literally have just tear this off the wall. I have his principles on my wall because it helps. Like if you have somebody that's just resistant to change, you have to figure out what motivates them and then try to plug into that mentality. Like if they don't like being told what to do, it's like, okay, talk to them privately and have this be something like try to frame this as something that they get total failure and success for. They're totally responsible for it. You're confident in them. You're not going to bother them because you trust them. But like this is the expectation, power to you, good luck, that sort of thing. Or like if you have somebody that's hesitant, like giving them the right training so they feel more confident. Like it's all like in construction, training is a lot about personality management. It's not that people won't do it. It's just you have to approach it in a way that they are more receptive to it.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I wanted to drop back to the chat here real quick. So while back to Kevin's comment about mock-ups, Nate Trick said, I have been pushing for a mock-up build day on job sites, all hands on deck. Everyone gets their hands on the build. And I think that is another great way to kind of do exactly what Sarah was talking about too. When you are moving from an environment where mock-ups are just another checkbox that you have to stand something up, and well, it doesn't have to be, just so, because it's just enough to show the architect and the owner kind of finishes, and we're going to move on after that. Moving into this new world, which like the Monadnocks of the world, Suffolk, other big contractors, that are working on these projects, they're now creating mock-ups and testing them for airtightness. So you're starting to change the whole dialogue about accountability from the mock-up stage before the guys even put their hands on the building. And to what to your comments, Sarah, again, I couldn't agree more that the building great buildings takes great people and great communication amongst those people to kind of make these things happen. Buildings don't build themselves, right? They're put together by people who decide to collaborate and work with each other to build great things. And so it really, at the end of the day, has to be fundamentally about better communication and creating that sort of space where, yeah, something might, these are risky projects. They're going to be hard to do for contractors that are coming into this for the first time. There's a fear factor. There's how am I going to make money? I'm going to lose money, so I'm not going to want to do it, or I'm not going to pay for this training because I don't know if I'm going to get my money's worth, down the road. Those are all absolutely rational and real, challenges that companies are struggling with. But for those who decide to take the leap and who can build a new kind of way of working with their subcontractors and with their owners and the other folks involved in the project. I mean, this is, as Sarah said in the beginning, I mean, this is the way we collectively feel the industry is going, whether we like it or not. We are getting to higher and higher performance. Code is getting there very slowly. But leaders out there in the field, these folks, whether it's on the development side or contractors who are investing in this training, architects who are leading the way with better design. I mean, there are market leaders out there who are pushing the market, and we're trying to share these stories and kind of encourage more folks to get involved. Some great comments in the chat, which maybe we should wait a few more minutes to jump over to some of those. So keep going in the chat. But I think,
Can I ask Sarah,
I'm sorry?
Can I ask Sarah what the name of that training or book she mentioned was? That she showed the principles? What was the name of that?
Oh, sorry. So this is Dale Carnegie's 30 Principles to Win Friends and Influence People. The book is super old. It's been around since like the early 1900s, but it is shocking like how relevant this still is. And I think post-COVID Zoom era, this could not be more useful because it's about how to interact with people, which we have forgotten how to do. So it's really, really useful. So Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Awesome. Thank you.
I would add to that. So the building behind me over here is actually a project that Sarah's company delivered that I was consulting to the architect on. It's not a Passive House project, I'll say up front, but it's here in Pittsburgh. And to that end, we were discussing yesterday. A general superintendent on the project was one of those old school guys. This was his last project. He subsequently retired just before the end of the job. But getting to build trust, with him in the dynamic where I was supporting the architect in the field and he was leading the field team, man, that was a bit of a dance early on to kind of break through those barriers. And again, not fundamentally around Passive House, but these same lessons apply. And I have learned from folks that I've worked with over the years, especially spending some time on the CM side, uh, asking good questions changes the nature of the conversation dramatically and helps to unlock potentially when you're faced with a tough situation on a job, asking, open-ended or, hey, educate me. What do you see here? What went wrong here? How could we have headed this off? How could we do this differently? Uh, in hindsight, but then also in foresight, like how do we plan now so that this thing comes together well, whatever we're working on in the assembly and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, I just think that theme of communication, we couldn't stress more. And I think in my career, I've certainly seen very much siloed communication. And I mean, I think, Enrico, we were talking about this the other day too, a little bit more in the trainings. as you said, you have architects take these trainings, you have builders, you have specialty trade contractors, general contractors, even some owners reps.
Mhm.
How do you see those conversations happening around the training? People trying to sort of break through those normal, like, I'm wearing my architect hat, and the builders and architects don't want to talk to each other because they don't trust each other. How do you break through that?
So that's a great question, and over the years, we have kind of learned our own internal manual on this, because you show the audience a detail, and architects are going to have a certain type of questions, and builders going to have a different type of question, and other professionals are going to have a different perspective as well. Um, think establishing a common goal is a good way to work together towards it, as opposed to uh, pointing fingers or keep that um, old fear of the other, and being judged or being misunderstood, or try to establish a safe space is the best first step. And you achieve that by asking questions, something that you and Sarah know we're already talking about. So if you ask questions, how would you do it? Do you have experience doing this before? Have you used this product before? Have you tested this in the past? It's a way to bring people into the conversation as opposed to telling them what to do. You know, um, different folks have different mindsets. Architects are very much interested in the why, because we are trained to then take that rule that we learn and apply it to other projects. So we kind of are more trained to absorb the abstract part of it, so that we can understand the logic behind it, as opposed to builders want to know exactly now what do I do to get this and then move on. So and you need to move them both at the same pace. You cannot answer only one or the other. Um, and I think, again, having them come in and asking them questions and how they would um, address a certain project or a certain problem is the best way to buy engagement. If people are given the opportunity to give their own opinion, they will be naturally more engaged with the outcome and in participating in that team exercise. That is my experience with doing this, bringing uh, different professionals to the table, working together.
Okay. Yeah, terrific. Hey, I don't know if everybody saw Matt Tracy's comment in the chat. I am loving this. Matt, I'm going to go off script here. I don't know if you want to come off or come on line here and share your comment with us. Uh, if you want to.
Sure. Hello,
Matt.
guys. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so I work in the business transformation space and was actually fortunate enough to work with a Microsoft executive that specializes in driving transformation within organizations. And he actually has a PhD in how our brains work in driving transformation. And it really comes down to change. That's the biggest issue in organizations when they want to change from operating one way to another, is the way humans work and just the resistance to change. There's something he refers to as dominant logics, which are the core things that drive the way society works. And without addressing those, it's very hard to drive change. And from my perspective, when I look at Passive House, and really every part of society, whether it's medical, building, whatever it may be, trying to drive change is the challenge, not, doing X versus Y isn't the issue. It's, my coach likes to say, if you want to make an enemy, change something on them. And then the other interesting thing is when you look at business, one of the challenges that I see from my perspective is individuals are trained to look at an individual component. I'm an accountant. I work in HR. I work in operations. However, who trains people to look at the whole company? Bill Gates has a phrase, you have to optimize the whole, not the part. If you optimize parts of something, you will de-optimize the whole. And I
Yeah,
look at Passive House. Go ahead,
I'm
Dave.
sorry. No, go ahead. Go ahead. That was.
And when you look at Passive House, I think it's a challenge because these individual trades that just want to do their thing now all of a sudden have to think about the big picture and how their trade impacts someone upstream or downstream. And as a society culture, we're not taught that way, and most of us don't think that way. And I think that's just a big challenge when it comes to Passive Houses, you can't just press over here and there's a downstream impact. But we're trying to shift it into our entire culture to make that change. And it's not unique to building. It's corporations have the same challenge. And, if you talk to my coach that I've worked with that does the transformational work, he'll say in 30 something years, it's never worked because driving change is that hard within organizations. And I think this is what Passive House is up against. And then you add in all the other marketing and PR around certain ways of building that people are just ingrained to believe. It's quite an uphill battle, but it's multifaceted. It's not just the building itself.
Yeah, Matt, so well said. And that part about focusing on the individual, roles or individual components versus the whole, I mean, that is 100% the mind shift that you have to have in the passive house space. You have to be remembering the holistic impacts of all these integrated, systems working together, and methodologies working together. I'm keeping an eye on the time here. So listen, thanks for that, Matt. Brilliant comment. I'm watching the time. We got about 5 minutes left in our scheduled time. So I don't know if anybody else was looking at the chat, if there were other questions.
I was keeping an eye on it. I think we covered most of it.
Touched on the training, questions about mock-ups. Yeah, I guess maybe this points to, like Nate jumped back in and said, I'd love to see some photos of testable mock-ups. And I think maybe we should just touch on, training opportunities and advice for folks who kind of want to go down this road, maybe back to the panel. Norm, maybe back to you, starting with you and then bounce to the others. Coming out of this, what are your recommendations for builders and tradespeople or others who kind of want to go down this road in terms of where to start?
Where to start? Oh, man.
Well, maybe where to start to get more information, to get some training, to kind of take that first step.
Yeah, I mean, training is that's the big thing. I mean, unfortunately, like the amount of training that's available does not match the amount of people who need to be trained. I mean, hopefully we're working on that. Yeah, get out there and ask questions and meet people and ask for others' experiences. I mean, one of the things that really turned my gears about Passive House when I first got into it was how open source and sharing everyone was with knowledge and experience. And that's one thing that's really stuck with me. And I always try to make sure that I'm taking more time to explain things and, really make sure that people who are very curious about this get all the information that they are looking for, or at least can get a pathway to that information so that they can stay on the track of learning.
Yeah, for sure. Kevin?
If I could just jump in and say, every larger project has a weekly site supers meeting or foreman's meeting or something, and those spaces always need to be quiet and be able to take a phone call and to be able to do that. So I personally think that those spaces where those meetings happen are perfect opportunities to build performance mock-ups. 4 walls of the actual 4 corners, inside corner, outside corner, a window and a door in a room that's actually sealed is more quiet. You add insulation, it's going to be, soundproofing. So they're great opportunities. You have your weekly meetings in there, and it probably won't get demolished or moved until the end of the project or towards the end of the project when that space needs to be utilized or used. Construction trailers. Why rent the trailer when you can build a mock-up that can act as your office for a little while? And if it can be blow door tested, and just a little bit of pressure, doesn't need to be full, and just find some of the mistakes. But if it can be actually performance tested, it's a great resource, because every time they get a new employee, somebody new, they have to walk past it. You can say, I want this to look like that. And it's always there. It's a great training resource. So I've had 2 projects that had full scale performance mock-ups on the site, and they were pretty successful. We found a window problem pretty early on, not quite in the mock-up, but on the first one, and it saved a lot of time because we were failing first. We were failing fast, and we solved the problem before it created any delays.
Brilliant. Sarah,
Yes.
what do you got here?
Yeah, so somebody asked for a photo of what a mock-up would look like. This is for a large commercial job, so this is like uh, on the medium size of what a testable mock-up would start to look like. So this, I don't know if you can see, but there's like a window opening with some picture frame flashing around it. So we ordered a very small version of the window that would end up on site, installed it, put the cladding on, and then basically put a chamber on the inside and did water and air testing over the window. So like for us, this isn't going to help you a ton for like a full building air test, except it would hit the window, which is one of the big areas where you tend to get leaks. So this would be like a medium size, like don't have a ton of money to do a full building air test or like a mock up that you can test the whole thing, but it will allow you to water and air test some of the most critical parts of the building. Like I said, it doesn't have the window in, doesn't have the cladding on, but this is probably, I don't know, like 4 or 5 feet tall by like 15 feet long. Just as an example, I'm trying to find other pictures that I can show.
That's
But
brilliant. That's brilliant, Sarah. But I think I got to jump back in because we're at time here. But I
oh,
do
sorry.
want to I do want to turn it back over to Enrico to close. But he's going to tell us a little bit more about the boot camps that are coming up. But just first, a huge thank you to our panelists, to Kevin, Norm, and Sarah, for
Thank you so
sharing
much.
all your experiences and inspiration here today, and your motivation, to fight these battles against what seemed like, to Matt's points, huge challenges here. But you know what? The only people who make change are the ones who go out and do it. So it's greatly appreciated for you all sharing today. Enrico, back to you. Take us home. Tell us about the boot camps. Tell people where they can sign up, and let's go.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks again, Sarah, Norm, and Karen, for your time today, and Dave yourself for running the panel discussion. Is much appreciated. As Dave was saying, like change happens because people make it. We EMU have decided to take the training on the road instead of having our own facility as a way to kind of help grow local communities. And I'm gonna pull up my a slide showing the upcoming boot camps for the spring, which is going to start with Pittsburgh at the end of February. We're going to be in Philadelphia in March, Brooklyn, Boston, and Maine before we come back to Denver in June. This is weeks of training, the boot camps. We have, if you go to our website, inupassive.com, you will find ways to sign up, as well as information as far as the different formats that we offer. We offer a focus format that is all in 1 week. Get in, get out, get certified, and get trained. But it is kind of demanding as far as the time schedule. So we have started offering a flex format, which is not shown here. It is available for all 5 boot camps that we see on this page. But if you go to our website, inupassive.com, you will find information on the hybrid format that the flex is, where you are required to take less time off from job site to come and take the training. That is, taking time off is one of the biggest pushbacks that we see from people being able to come and take the training, more so than the cost. The cost for a week of training is going to be $24.90 starting January 1st. If you buy the ticket before the end of the year, it's going to be the same price as this year, so $2,200. But really, we started offering the flex format as a way to people to do some homework. So go through the course and the building science before coming in and doing the hands-on part of the workshop. Both formats, the flex and the focus, have the same content. It comes down to personal preference and personal scheduling, but I strongly recommend these opportunities because it's a great way to move forward in your career and in your local ecosystem.
So I would say the other thing to do, the link to Emu is in the Emu Passive is in the chat. Check that out, and also reach out. So there's a lot of people going to be working on this behind the scenes here at, like I said in the beginning, Green Building Alliance, based out of Pittsburgh, but reaching statewide. Green Building United, based out of Philadelphia area, and also reaching across the state, as well as Passive House Pennsylvania and the Passive House Network. So reach out to any of us in the network and folks on the call to kind of find more information as we go along. We're also going to be trying to pull together some funding support to get folks, who can otherwise not afford it to get to the trainings. So sign in, get in touch and get connected. And we look forward to seeing everybody at the trainings. Take care.
Thank you so much for your time, and it was great to have you all here today.
Thanks so much.
Bye now.
So long.
Thanks.